Welcome. Be sure to like and subscribe for more scary stories. Story number 1. I had always been aware of the deep web. You hear the craziest, most fucked up stories from people who have the balls to explore it. Websites that involve human experimentation, hiring a hitman, and even watching people through their own security cameras. It's fucked up. But honestly, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't just slightly interested. Now, just to point out, there was no malicious intent behind my exploration of the deep web. I was just curious to see if it really was as bad as people said it was. The first thing I stumbled upon was a website extremely centered around death, which gave me a really uneasy feeling, so I didn't hang around that webpage very long. It takes quite a bit to freak me out, so it's safe to say I was a little surprised that I couldn't even stomach the first website I clicked on. But it's not supposed to be all unicorns and rainbows, right? Next, I clicked a website that was dedicated to watching people through security cameras. Most of the screens showed empty living rooms and patios. Some of them showed oddly filled rooms, like rooms that were packed with stuffed animals, and another that was eerily decorated with fucking Christmas lights and fake Santa Claus statues. Another screen showed a young woman doing yoga. That one had a lot of views. I didn't watch that one very long. Something inside me felt ill and just wrong, like what I was doing, what's sickening. I shook my head, blinking away any more curiosity before I hovered my mouse over the tiny X to close the window. Right before I pressed the mouse, I saw a blue link under a black screen that said, "Proceed with caution." I bit down on my back teeth, yelling internally to leave the page. Don't click the link. It's not worth it. It could be murder. Would that make me an accomplice? What if it was someone skinning an animal or some shit like that? But then again, what if it wasn't? I don't know what the hell propelled me to move my mouse away from the window, hovering it over the link instead. But that's where I ended up. My curiosity always got the best of me, and no matter how twisted my stomach felt, or how strong the feeling of dread was that lingered right over my head, I had to know. I really just had to know what the link led to, or I would go crazy until I finally figured it out. So, I pressed my mouse down and watched the link turn purple, felt my mouth go dry, and watched as the screen slowly loaded. The page was just comprised of a large screen, like the security camera page, only it was just one. The room was concrete. It was dark. There must have been a night vision camera or something, because everything had a weird blue-green tinge, but you could tell there was little to no light. There was a dark liquid on the floor in a medium-sized puddle. I told myself it was gasoline. Don't ask me why. Movement in the far right of the screen caught my attention, and I immediately perked in my desk chair, inching my face closer to the screen of my laptop. It looked like an arm, like someone's forearm. They were standing there, not really moving, but subtly swaying, just enough to not look completely still. "Hey," I said before shaking my head and slapping my mouth shut. "Stupid." Then the person walked. They walked over towards the left of the screen. I felt my stomach knot, felt my throat tingle and tighten, bile rising in the back of my throat. I knew my mouth was open, gaping, and my eyes were wide, face screwed up into an expression of pure disgust. It was a young woman. She looked like she couldn't be older than 25 or so. Long, dark, and dirty hair was in tangles, like she'd been pulling at it. Her leg was dragging, her other skinny leg doing most of the work as she limped weakly. Her head was down, looking at the floor, and the sound of her dragging her foot across the concrete echoed in my silent room. I didn't think it could get any worse. I was so fucking wrong. Suddenly, The woman raised her head, and it looked like it weighed a ton on her tiny body. I hadn't noticed it before, only able to barely make out her side profile, but now it was clear as day. She looked around, eyes watering with tears and black makeup streaming down her face. Small strands of bloody thread were intertwined in her lips, messily tied, locking them together. Dark blood stained her chin, probably from where she'd tried desperately to open her mouth, to scream, before realizing she couldn't. Her dainty fingers were stained as well, the same color as the puddle on the concrete. My whole body felt weak. My stomach was sick. I tried to tell myself it was fake, that it was all a big hoax. My eyes scanned to the bottom left of the screen. 5,623. 5,623 people were watching. Unable to fight it any longer, I ran straight into the bathroom, puking my insides into the toilet bowl. Everything in me felt disgusting, wrong, twisted. Once I was finally done, I laid on the floor of the bathroom, letting the cool tiles try to soothe my burning body. My head was spinning. I kept repeating to myself, over and over in my head, that I shouldn't have clicked the link. I should have left. I should have closed the fucking window and told my inner curiosity to go fuck itself. Instead, I was laying on the floor, the bathroom reeking of vomit, and my mind a complete mess over that the hell I was supposed to do. Should I get the link and send it to the police? Should I call them now? My first instinct was to copy and paste the link, just in case, then call the police and inform them of what was happening. Maybe they could trace the IP address or something. Maybe they would recognize the girl and know where to start looking. Maybe I could save her life. I'd feel really fucking dumb if this was all fake just to get viewers, but I wasn't about to gamble. Not with what was at stake. I ignored the dizzy feeling flooding my head as I jumped up, grabbing the doorknob and twisting it a bit too harshly. When I flung the door open, my phone buzzed in my pocket, scaring the living shit out of me. I stopped mid-panic and picked it up with shaky hands. I saw my girlfriend's name, and immediately slid to answer. My voice was a complete wreck, my eyes finding the screen where the girl shrunk down to the ground, the sound of her cries bouncing around the room, making my body feel rigid. I had nothing left to throw up. I still felt so sick. Madeline, you're not going to believe what I just fucking saw. What? Are you okay? Have you been crying? No, I'm not okay, I answered, averting my eyes from the screen. I know you said to stay away from the deep web, but are you kidding me? Her voice went from caring to mad in a split second. I told you to stay away from that place. You never listened to me. You never fucking do. There's a girl, I said weakly. She's trapped in some basement or something. Her mouth is like sewn shut. There's blood all over her face and hands. I don't know what to do, Madeline. The woman's cries got louder, more desperate, but muffled. I'm so sorry. Close it out. Clear your history and never go back there again. I'm not kidding. But should I call? No. Her voice was stern now. You don't know if it's bullshit. It's probably staged to gain disgusting viewers. Apparently like yourself. People do it all the time. That's why I said it'd be best if you just stayed away from there. You could get yourself into a lot of trouble. I didn't say anything, wordlessly walking over to the desk. My hands shook as I raised my mouse to the smalls once more. My eyes watched the number of viewers slowly tick higher and higher before I closed the window. I felt even worse than before. Okay, We can file a report tomorrow, just in case. But for now, go to sleep and stay the fuck away. I can't believe you even went there in the first place. I didn't have the energy to argue with her. Guilt plagued my whole body, drowning me. It was all I could feel. I told her, good night, that I was sorry, and that I loved her before I hung up and made my way to the couch to sleep. Or try to sleep. It didn't feel right, even being in my bedroom, or being anywhere near my computer. Not while that girl was still trapped, unable to scream for help, unable to talk at all. I know it could be fake, but was that really a risk I was willing to take? I looked up some Google searches over what was fake on the deep web, and read multiple stories about staged webcam videos, which made me feel a little bit better. It didn't make the sick, guilty feeling go away, though. It's safe to say that I didn't get much sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, or even began to drift off, I would see the woman's face, the thread laced into her lips, the blood staining her mouth, her fingers, the floor. I continued to grow more and more anxious and uneasy, deciding that maybe getting out of the house, heading over to the local CVS, and picking up some melatonin might help. I threw my blanket off, slid on my shoes, and grabbed my keys and wallet from the nightstand. The cool air felt amazing, and did wonders to calm the whirlwind of thoughts in my head. I went to check the time, realizing I'd left my phone at home. Not a huge deal. The store was only a few minutes away from my house. I ended up buying melatonin and a stronger sleeping pill, just in case those didn't work. I also got a pack of bottled water to help rehydrate after I vomited up all the contents in my stomach earlier. By the time I got home, I felt much, much better, which lasted about 3 seconds before I noticed that my front door was wide open. Now, I may have been in a state of shock and panic, but I never, ever leave my front door open or even unlocked. My heart immediately began to race. I got out of my car, closing the door quietly and unlocking my trunk, grabbing the crowbar that I keep in there. "Who's there?" I yelled into the house, waiting for any noise. "Who is in there?" My own voice was shaking and weak. I was met with complete silence. Keeping the crowbar up and ready to strike, I walked to the couch and felt for my phone. As soon as I found it, I hit the emergency button and waited until I got a hold of a 911 operator, letting her know that I think my house was just broken into. She told me police would be on their way. After checking around the house for anything odd, I decided to give my girlfriend a call, letting her know what had happened. The phone rang, and then rang some more. After getting her voicemail, I hung up, knowing she'd probably be asleep this late at night. I waited about 20 or so minutes for the police to show up and walked around with them like a scared puppy as they checked every room. They ended up just having me fill out a report telling me they'll keep patrol cars in the area just in case anyone else gets hit. As they were leaving, I checked to see if Madeline had called back yet, but there wasn't any missed calls. I, however, did notice several outgoing calls to her cell phone. Outgoing call to Madeline, 3:12 a.m. Outgoing call to Madeline, 3:14 a.m. Outgoing call to Madeline, 3:17 a.m. Outgoing call to Madeline, 3:20 a.m. And then another one at 3:56, which was around the time I'd gotten home. My mind went into an automatic panic, knowing for a fact that I did not make those calls. I quickly checked my texts, reading one I'd apparently sent out at 3:23. "Hey, can't sleep. Gonna come over. Mind leaving the back door unlocked so I can get in?" I didn't send that message. My stomach dropped. My heart thudded loudly in my chest as I noticed her reply directly underneath. "Sorry, I was sleeping. Thanks for waking me up, by the way. Lose your key again? It's unlocked. Don't be too late. Without a second thought, I jumped up, running to lock all the doors and windows in my house, keeping the crowbar tight in my hand as I ran to my car. I drove as fast as my little Civic would allow all the way to her house, ignoring any stoplights. It only took me 3 minutes to get there, but I still knew it'd be too late. I made my way to her back door, feeling every cell in my body burn when I saw it was wide open. My face was hot, my hands were shaking, but I stepped in, crowbar raised like a bat, ready to swing. I tried to keep my emotions at bay as I looked around her dark house. "Madeline," I called out, "are you okay, babe?" Nothing. Silence. "Madeline?" A small scream came from her bedroom just up the stairs. My legs jerked to a run as I flew up the stairs, slamming her door open. I looked at her empty bed, her empty room. Confused, I heard the scream again. Only this time, I heard that it was coming through her computer monitor. I felt numb as I looked at the screen, noticing the same website I saw earlier, only instead of one woman, I saw two. The first was lying on the floor, not moving, in that puddle of dark liquid. I recognized the second girl, just as I had recognized her voice. My heart shattered as I saw her face, streaked in blood. The same threading was sewn into her eyelids, locking them shut. Her scream hit my bones, surrounded my body. It was all I could hear. Her face was twisted in pure terror. I cried pathetically as her voice began to go out, continuing to grow weaker and rasped. I locked my jaw, picking up my cell and dialing 911 for the second time. Only this time it barely rang once before the deep, gravelly voice of another man answered. "You should not have called." Chills shot down my body, and I heard the phone thud as it hit the carpeted floor. My breath hitched in my throat as I bent to pick it up, hanging up the call and racing down the stairs. How did he do that? How did he redirect my call away from the police? I felt my heart race as I darted out of her back door in a frenzy as I sprinted to the closest house. I pounded the door, screaming at the top of my lungs until the neighbor opened it, her face tired, confused, and scared. She let me in, and I explained through frantic tears what happened. I'm typing this on my phone to post as we both try to get a hold of the cops, but neither of our calls are going through, and neither is her landline. I think someone is messing with our cellular signal, and they may have cut her line. But we're going to keep trying. I'm scared for me. I'm scared for my girlfriend. And I'm scared for my neighbor. I don't know what's going to happen to me. If you don't hear from me again, please take this advice and this experience to heart. Stay away from the deep web. For fuck's sake, please, please stay away from the deep web. Story number 2. This story happened to my friend on the deep web. I had a pretty scary experience too, but mine was a few years ago. The story happened to my friend just 1 week ago. For those who don't know, the deep web is pretty much the internet that isn't indexed by search engines like Yahoo, Google, Bing, or etc. It can only be accessed by special software such as Tor. To give you some context, this is the friend that showed me how to get on the deep web. He has always been really fascinated with it. But after my horror story experience with the deep web hackers, he pretty much took a long break. He was too worried. This guy seemed professional. He didn't resume using the deep web until about a year after my story, but he didn't tell anyone. He would buy stolen Apple products, drugs, etc. About a week or two ago, he was buying some cocaine. It wasn't from the seller he normally buys through though, but it was really cheap. So he gave the seller his address, fake email he used, so they could stay in contact until the deal was done. He wasn't too worried. This guy seemed professional, and it was the same procedure for most of his purchases. My friend had told him to ship it in a movie case or something that his mom wouldn't expect to have drugs in. This was probably his biggest mistake. He let the man know he was just a teenager. A few days later, his mom walks in the house and hands my friend a movie that he had ordered online. He took it and opened it up, but inside there wasn't any cocaine. Just a folded up piece of paper. He opened it and read it. "There has been a problem. Email me for details." At the bottom, the man had left a new email for my friend to contact. My friend got on his email and asked the guy what the problem was. He responded, "Something has happened. If I were to send it to you, it can be traced back to me and we would both be caught. Meet me at the elementary school at 7 o'clock. We will just do it in person." The school wasn't too far away, so my friend told my mom he was staying the night at my house and headed off to meet the man. He called me and asked if I could be there with him, but I was really busy with my schoolwork, so I said I couldn't. I did tell him to take a knife or something, just in case things went wrong. When he got to the parking lot outside the school, he heard a car honking its horn. He saw it was a Jeep, but the license plate had been covered up by duct tape, and the windows were tinted very dark. The man got out of his car and gave my friend drugs, and my friend paid him. It seemed like everything went fine. My friend got in his car and sat there a bit to call and tell me everything was fine. He had known us. When he had hung up, the man was still there, though. Why was he waiting? He didn't think too much of it and drove off. When he got to the first red light, he noticed that the man's car was right behind him. He was starting to get a little nervous, but he kept driving. When he reached his neighborhood, the man was still following him. So he decided it would be a bad idea to lead him to his house. He instead turned into the next neighborhood and took a whole bunch of random turns, hoping to lose them. Eventually, he no longer saw the car, so he pulled the car into his garage and called it a day. That night, he noticed the sound of a car engine. He looked out his window and saw the man's car parked in his driveway. He got wide-eyed and snuck downstairs and peered through the window. Inside the car, the man was smoking a cigarette and talking on the phone. But in the passenger seat, he also saw a second man. The second one was a lot more suspicious looking, even more so than the shady drug dealer man. The second one had messed up hair, a trashy shirt, and while it was hard to see, my friend could almost make out a scar from a massive burn on the side of his neck. On his face, he kept watching the two men until the second man began to look out the window more and more often. Eventually, he was just staring at the window. My friend had had enough and was going to call the cops. He didn't care if he got in trouble at this point. He moved away from the window and called the police, who told him to grab a weapon or something to defend himself and wait for the police. He waited for about 5 minutes when he saw a figure quietly come out of his mom's room, who was still sleeping. The man shut the door behind him and noticed my friend had seen him. The figure sprinted towards him with what looked like a knife raised in his hand. My friend grabbed a pot on the nearby table and threw it at the figure. It hit him in the face. He screamed and fell to the floor. My friend turned on the lights and saw the second man with the burn rolling on the floor. His face was covered in blood, and shards of glass were sticking out. His right eye had tons of blood pouring out. He must have been hit pretty hard. As the man began to slowly get up, my friend grabbed a kitchen knife and drove it into the man's shoulder. Another scream could be heard from the man. The man began to stumble toward the front door, while police sounds could be heard. Both men were caught on sight, but my friend's mom had been killed. Her throat had been slit, and she had 23 stab wounds, the duct tape covering her mouth. My friend was arrested too for drug possession, and his trial is coming up. But he lost his mom because of it. So I don't think he will be buying drugs from the deep web ever again. Story number 3. I've always had a morbid sense of curiosity. And while that's not a fact I'm particularly proud of, I've always just jotted it down to teenage curiosity. To be honest, it probably started back in middle school when people thought it was fun to send around horrible videos of executions and bizarre porn fetishes to each other on the MSN messaging site. Just mentioning it makes me feel old. These days, there's an overabundance of these sites' places to watch people die. Blurry videos of car crashes, beheadings, and animal abuse. Of course, it's not something I actively seek out, but when I stumble across it, I feel compelled to just watch, to prove to myself that nothing can affect me. Though for the truly gruesome stuff, one needs to visit the so-called dark web. As a guy who has fallen far behind in the advancement of technology, it absolutely baffled my mind that only a tiny fragment of the internet is available through a Google search. The rest, which makes up approximately 99.9%, is hidden and requires a special browser to access. With the help of a YouTube tutorial, I quickly downloaded the Tor browser and went on my way to search for the hidden aspects of the internet. It couldn't have taken more than half an hour of clicking on shared onion links before I stumbled across something that quenched my thirst for the horrible forever. The website itself was rather plain, just a black background with a video player in its center and a chat box beneath. Within a few seconds of entering the website, the video itself had loaded and automatically started playing. What was depicted before me was a scrawny-looking man in his early 20s, strapped to a chair, uncovered and covered in wounds. In the upper left corner of the video, a timer ran, counting up each second, 24 minutes and 14 seconds. "Please stop. Please. It was an accident, I swear," he yelled. A larger man entered the picture, a large needle in his hand connected to an empty syringe. Without speaking a word, he stuck the needle as far as it could go into the victim's abdomen. He let out a loud scream as the man removed the needle and plunged it back in. After a few stabs, the man grabbed a hammer and hit the victim straight in his jaw, shattering his mandible and leaving him unable to form any coherent speech. He let out a gargled whimper before passing out. I tried to forward the video. Sure, it had to be fake, but that's when I realized that it wasn't pre-recorded footage, but a live stream. 26 minutes and 12 seconds were the words that lit up the screen. The chat beneath the video went wild, calling out the victim as a pathetic excuse for a human being, demanding that the man continue the torture. A few seconds passed, and the chat was replaced by a voting form containing only 2 options: life or death. The votes were quickly counting, the bar for death rising rapidly. As much as I could stomach, I wouldn't be part of an act of murder, so I quickly voted for life. In the end, the results were displayed on the screen. Out of 200 people, the results were 95% for death and 4% for life. 1% did not vote. 10 people had tried to save the poor kid, but it wasn't enough. Without further warning, the man grabbed the hammer and started repeatedly hitting him, starting from the legs and working his way up until all that remained was a bloody pile of broken flesh. I sat speechless, staring helplessly at the screen as I noticed that my camera light had lit up. The video player vanished, and in its place, 10 smaller boxes popped up, all displaying people from various places around the world, all being unknowingly filmed by their own webcams. To my absolute horror, one of the boxes showed my bedroom and myself wearing a terrified expression. It quickly dawned on me that these were the people who voted to save the poor kid. Who will be next? A message said, as a timer counted down towards 0. A few boxes turned black, to which the chap responded with laughter, a hopeless attempt at escape. 3, 2, 1. 9 of the 10 pictures disappeared from the screen, including my own, leaving the screen occupied by a middle-aged Asian man. Frozen in fear. We'll see you soon. Good luck. I let out a sigh of both relief and panic. I'd escaped unharmed, but not everyone was that lucky. Of course, I called the police, but by the time they could even look into it, the link had long since expired. I don't know what else I could have done, but it taught me not to look too deep into the depths of the dark web. Story number 4. Last year, I did something really bad. I got onto the dark web with a few friends, and I'm telling you, it is real. There's a certain site, and I'm not giving the full name. Let's just call it the Black Room. Me and my friends waited until their parents went to bed, and all 3 of us pulled up chairs to the computer. It was a live streaming site, whose title was in Russian, and that translates to live preview in Serbian. There was a black screen, and people were typing into the chat box in another language. We just watched and waited for something to happen. A topless woman with long, dark brown hair appeared in a chair. She was wearing blue jeans. Her hands were tied with what looked to be thin blue ropes and duct tape double wrapped. I guess it was to make sure she didn't get out. Her feet were cuffed together with what looked like metal leg cuffs. She had a blank look on her face. The camera flashed off to dark again. It looked like someone was covering the camera with a towel. Then, I heard the sick sound of a drill being turned on. The towel was removed, and I heard her shouting in another language, probably begging for her life, screaming and crying. But she could not move. There was a shirtless man in a BDSM mask. If you don't know what that is, I suggest you look it up. It was a black leather-looking mask with eye holes and a zipper where you could zip up your mouth. She began screaming, and I wanted to turn away, but curiosity got the best of me. He put the fat metal tip of the drill straight into her eye. It made a sickening, squishing sound, and she was moaning and screaming as the drill went directly through her eyeball. Dark red blood began oozing out, and it looked like the poor woman was going into shock. She was shaking so bad. The camera had zoomed in. Her eye was still attached and had major blunt force trauma. It looked like a big black bloody hole. How I was half there, somewhat. It was really hard to look at. Then, the camera lens went black again. We heard 2 loud pops that sounded like guns. It was silent. No more sound, no more video. The viewing was obviously over. Oh my God, I told my friends. I just think we witnessed a murder. They shot her. They really shot her. My friends and I agreed we would never watch anything like this again. I went home feeling disgusted with myself. I hoped and prayed it was not real. Sadly, it may have been. I promised myself no more. I would never watch anything like that again. That lasted till about the next weekend. Next Saturday night, after playing on the PS4 for a few hours, we began to get tired and smoked a few joints to wake us up. Then my best friend, we will call him Rob, suggested we get on the dark web again. Rob is a computer genius and knows how to get deep into the dark web. He used a VPN. We decided to click on the Black Room again. Rob told me that only 4% of the internet is visible to the public, and 96% of the remaining is made up of the deep web. That made me feel a bit sick to my stomach. What a disturbing thought. It took a few hours, and the site wanted us to pay with Bitcoin, and we did. I don't know how we easily got in the first time without paying. I guess we just got lucky because they wanted us to pay next time. This time the screen was not black, and there was a concrete-looking room and a bucket. A big, heavy-set man had this white pillowcase around his head with holes cut out for his eyes and mouth. You could not see his face. He picked up the bucket and began laughing, showing us the bucket, and then showing what was in the bucket. I almost threw up. It was a bucket full of body parts. Human body parts floating in this clotted red goop. I was assuming it was coagulated blood. I just remember seeing bloody teeth, a few fingers, and what looked like a couple of eyeballs or what was left of them. This couldn't be real, I thought. But by the way the man was laughing, it was no joke. It had to be animal parts. One thought, please let it be animal parts. The camera zoomed in, and on the bucket was a white piece of paper that read victim number 12. It was written in permanent marker. Was this the remains of some poor, unfortunate soul who got brutalized like the first victim? Was this the remains of the poor lady we saw last week? I had really hoped not. I wasn't prepared for what happened next. The screen went black again, and in a chair sat another woman, this time with blonde hair, and her eyes were covered with a black scarf. She was bound by her hands and feet with the same looking thin blue rope, and I felt very sorry for her. Her waist was strapped in with some sort of belt, holding her down onto the chair. A white sheet was hung up behind her. I wanted to help her and felt like there was nothing I could do. The fat man began dipping his hands in the gooey mess and trying to shove it in the woman's mouth. She tried to hold her mouth shut, but the man got angrier and slapped her in the face. It sounded like he was telling her, "Eat it, eat it." She began to chew and cry, and then vomited the whole mess up on her pretty white silk blouse. People were typing in different languages, and the chat box was going wild. Then I heard it, the cranking of a chainsaw. There, standing beside the poor girl, appeared the same man from the first video. He was holding a chainsaw, shirtless, black mask and all. I got a sickening feeling in my stomach. This is not going to be good. I had seen what chainsaws do to people. Chainsaw accidents are horrible. I wanted to stop viewing right then and there, but my friends were eager to watch, and I didn't want to seem like a wimp. She was screaming her guts out, flailing, trying to get out of the chair. Good thing we all had our headphones on because this was really loud. I watched in horror as he began to try and cut off her arm. The chainsaw went through a little, and then kicked back in a jerky upward motion, coming close to knocking her attacker out. He must have hit her arm bone, I thought. I think this really angered him. I could hear him screaming in another language, so I assume he might have got nicked by the chainsaw. Suddenly, he shoved the blade directly into her stomach area. He pushed in and began to cut vertically upwards. Her frantic screams were muffled by the chainsaw. Droplets of blood began spraying into the air onto the sheet. Little pieces of meat and tissue flew all over the room. She began convulsing. Her eyes rolled to the back of her head, and she was gone, just like that. The man slowly pulled the chainsaw out, and as he did, I could see what looked like her intestines hanging out. The screen went black. I ran to the bathroom to throw up. I think I threw up for 15 minutes. I almost passed out. My friends laughed at me, and I knew behind the laughter it disturbed them too. All I know now is there are some really sick people out there in different parts of the world that will do anything on the web for money. These people have no heart or soul. They are inhumane and sick in the head. So stay off the dark web. There are just some things you can never forget that will disturb your mind forever. You will not be able to undo what you have seen. Remember that. This is the Curator. I hope you've enjoyed today's scary stories. Until next time.